Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Invest Africa. I'm Alicia Seckham. According to the Small Enterprise Development Agency, family-owned businesses make up close to 50% of the economic growth of South Africa, though only a few of the country's iconic family companies have managed to remain in business over the decades. The trend is also relevant to the rest of the continent, with the majority of SMEs operating as family-owned entities. How do you make sure that family businesses retain their longevity across generations, and are they the type of investments you should be looking at? That's the topic of today's show, and joining me in studio this week to share their insights are Craig Steven-Jennings, who's a partner of consumer markets and technology at KPMG, Jonathan Marks, who's director of the full-time MBA program at Gibbs, and we also have the CEO of a 42-year-old family business, Ryan Bacchus from the Bacchus Brothers. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining me here today. Jonathan, let's kick off with you. I mean, you don't do business with friends, much less with family. I can't count the number of times I've actually heard that phrase being used. Just how popular is it venturing down this family business avenue and making that kind of investment in the current economic environment?
I think it's an inevitability that you'll end up working with family. And I think if you look at the statistics worldwide, well in the majority, in the 80% of businesses are family businesses. They might begin as family businesses and end as something else, but I think that they tend to begin as a family enterprise. And I think there are a lot of reasons for that, that maybe we can explore as we chat to the other guests. Mm-hmm. But I think that it is an inevitability, and I think it makes for a good investment, both as a family to invest in your own financial future, and ultimately as that business begins to grow for other investors.
Craig, what makes a family business different to any other?
I think there's a number of aspects, Alicia. I think the combination of family and business together make it more complex. Balancing the family's interests and values with business objectives and strategies is not always easy. So that's probably the primary difference. There are many others, but I think that's probably the primary difference.
Mm-hmm. Ryan, let's bring you into the conversation at this part because you've grown to be a part of a family business now where the Bacchus Brothers legacy started back in 1971. What's the appeal for you?
The appeal of me working for a family business. You know, I love working for my uncles. I'm very close to them. They're my three uncles, which is Bernard, Norman and Tyron. Mm-hmm. They've been in the business since the beginning, and my father runs the property division. So me being in the furniture side, I get to talk to my uncles on a daily basis, you know, see them on a daily basis. So
do you still like them on a daily basis?
Hey, I love my uncles. You know, the more you see each other, the more fond you get with each other. And yeah, I'm very blessed to be working with my uncles.
Okay, so we're hearing from someone who's involved in a family business here, Craig, but the major issue right at the top is how you separate family and business issues. There's a fine line that that could be crossed there, where there's no end to business talk and focus when it comes to family members engaging even after business hours. So the business never sleeps. So I mean, things can get a little bit tricky, a little bit dicey.
Yeah, I think they can, Alicia, and I think the key is to create some structure and to create a routine within the family and within the business, to create some boundaries, to create a common understanding within the family around work-life balance. In a family business, it's rather more work-life integration, but it's understanding how the different family members respond, what work-life balance means to them, and being able to adapt the management style of the business to incorporate all those different aspects. So it really goes around work-life balance, and more and more nowadays it becomes more about work-life integration than it does about balance.
Yeah, of course, Jonathan, what this brings into the spotlight then is corporate governance as a whole, because you need to adhere to corporate governance, as does any business. I mean, you've got to argue though whether this works for family businesses where so much happens informally and outside of business hours, begging the question whether it's appropriate for regulators in the first place to insist on a strict adherence, or whether family businesses should be left a little bit to their own devices.
I'm not really of the opinion that businesses that are family owned or controlled should be treated any differently. I think that they should be governed in the same way as any other business is. But the point that Ryan made earlier, I think, illustrates one of the aspects or strength of family business, and that there's an intimacy in a relationship that occurs. So I think that there's another layer of governance that often occurs. And maybe with larger family businesses, there might even be some sort of family council that might act as another layer, somewhere in between the board of directors and the shareholders, assuming they might not be the same people. I think family has an interest in business, and one has to find some kind of governance structure that allows them to have a voice, knowing that they might not necessarily be involved. So how do you include the next generation of a family in the thinking around a family business, even though they're not actively involved in the business itself?
Yeah. Let's take a look at the kind of business plan that you've got on the table and the kind of corporate governance measures that Backhouse Brothers really employs, where there is a governance framework, just how strict a structure that Craig highlighted are we looking at on your end?
The biggest problem that I had was we went from 48 staff members to 180 staff members within 3 years of me taking over. And from 40 so staff members, it was very much a family business. It was, people loved working there because it was such a relaxed environment. The uncles are absolute gentlemen, walk in, kiss the staff, hello, how are you, hug everyone. If someone's upset, we generally want to know why you're upset. So the biggest problem that I had was keeping that warm family culture and still bringing in that very strong corporate governance, because managing decorators, very arty types of people, and then you have to bring them into this very strict cultural thing, and you don't want to demotivate them, was a very tough thing to balance, but at the moment it seems to be getting right. People
how did you get it right? How do you get it right for fitting into this more formalized structure?
Most of my day is dealing with staff and showing them that we care about them. How are you today? If you're upset, what's wrong? How can we make life better for you? Is it the company, or what can we do to make it better? And the more effort you put in, the more rewards you get, there's no doubt. My uncles, I got that from my uncles as well. We want people happy at work. If you're not happy at work, how can we make it better for you? And the people that don't fit in will have to leave, because it is very much a culture, Backhouse Brothers. And the people that do stay end up staying for 35 years plus, 20 years, 15 years.
So let's put the focus then on that skills base that a company actually employs, because we've heard the phrase rags to riches to rags in 3 generations before as a result of inappropriate appointments for the sake of family as such. So let's talk around how much risk that in fact poses and how businesses can actually mitigate, Craig, against that risk.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about, Alicia, is succession.
Yeah.
And, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations is a term that I heard also within my family. And I do come from a family business. I think, again, what happens is that very often decisions around succession are emotive and made emotionally rather than rationally. Sometimes appointments and succession appointments are based on family standing rather than competence. And that is not healthy. Although it is endemic in family businesses, it needs to be managed. So, the guidance really is to plan properly. So plan for succession properly. If businesses need an advisor to take them through the succession, get an advisor. It's often a good idea. Provides an independent view. Setting goals for the succession in terms of what the business would like to achieve, and align those with what the family would like to achieve in terms of succession. Setting some key performance indicators for the people that are moving through the business, be they family members or non-family members, so that you can give the entire organization the perception and the idea, the clear idea, that succession is about competence and performance and not only about family.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to do that. Otherwise, you have the potential that the 180 employees that you have feel that it's only family members that are going to be successful. There's no place for me. Whereas if it's based on competence, there's a space for them.
Could I interject here? I think that the succession planning is really a link to the life cycle of a business. It's a step in the life cycle of a business, and it's different for a family as a corporate-owned business or an investment-owned business. And you've got to think of 3 dimensions. You've got to think of the growth of the business, the growth in management skill that's needed, and the changing shareholder relationship. And I think those 3 need to be managed, and I think that's part of what you were saying, is that there needs to be an integration between these elements of a business when you're thinking about succession.
Well, we'll get more in depth into succession planning in just a bit. Before we do, Ryan, with what's being said at the table, from your experience, has there been a point where blood's been thicker than logic? I mean, let's get to that. To what extent has that posed a potential stumbling block for the business?
When I was appointed, there was some staff that were a little bit critical if I could actually handle the job, and that was the biggest problem. Number one, I was one of the youngest at the time. So there was a lot of pressure for me to, prove myself to my uncles, prove myself to the family, and most importantly, prove myself to the staff. And, eventually they could see that my intentions were good. I asked everyone, how could I make the business better? What's wrong with Bacchus Brothers? What's good in Bacchus Brothers? Fix the things that are wrong and enhance whatever everyone's liking about the business. And then eventually people did come around and saw that, I'm genuine, they can talk to me, and, the intentions are good, and we're here to look after everyone.
Absolutely. Craig, BE requirements, I mean, in a family business, it's got to be a tough requirement to fulfill. Are South African businesses getting that right?
I think to some degree, BEE is really self-serving in some ways. So if your customers demand that you comply to be successful in your marketplace. So if that is required, family businesses are addressing it. The biggest challenge for family businesses is at the ownership level. Families don't necessarily want to give away ownership. But I think as people become more familiar with the BEE scorecard and the BEE regulations, and they realize that there's more to BEE than simply ownership, and that you can in fact achieve a very good score for BEE without giving up ownership, they're beginning to get it right more and more.
Yeah, absolutely. Ryan, talk us through your experience in actually managing growth, because not only has Bacchus Brothers grown as a retailer, but you alluded to it a little earlier, you've diversified with a strong focus on property development as well, and you've seen growth in that realm as well. So, how do you reap that kind of success? What kind of plans have you as a family business put in place to ensure that you're a sustainable business?
You see, my father, Dennis, he runs the property side. So he takes care of A to Z on the property side. My brother, Sheldon, he's an architect. So he's gone into the property side and he's a developer on in his own right. What makes it easy is that each one of us have our own job to do. My father does the property. We don't really argue. We all give our opinion, and that's how the property runs. And then on the furniture side, my uncles are very involved with the designing of product, as I was mentioning to these gentlemen at the back. The uncles help with the designing of products, new ranges. When we have big clients, they're there to assist and schmooze the clients, pull out the red carpet, and make sure that they're happy with that. And then I handle the operations of the business. So each one of us have our key focus. That's our areas. We all talk about everything else, but I think that's what helps us sustain a successful path, is that we each designated with our certain jobs.
Absolutely. Well, adhering to good corporate governance, of course, sets up that framework that we talk about that serves to regulate exactly how decisions are made, who's accountable to whom, who's responsible for what, and how effectively that business is going to be managed as well. We're heading into a quick commercial break, but there's more on Invest Africa when we return, so stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching Invest Africa, where this week we're talking family businesses on the continent. And still with me in studio is Craig Steven-Jennings. He's a partner of consumer markets and technology at KPMG. Jonathan Marks, director of the MBA program at Gibbs. And Ryan Bacchus is CEO of Bacchus Brothers as well. Gentlemen, let's get back into conversation, because we started talking a little bit, Craig, about succession ahead of the break and planning in that regard. And part of good corporate governance policy dictates a succession plan needing to be in place. Do businesses get this more right than wrong in your books?
Difficult to tell, Alicia. Obviously, the businesses that succeed get it right, and those that fail get it wrong.
Good barometer.
So, it's difficult to tell whether more businesses get it right or wrong. But I think, what's important about this is that people don't try, or businesses don't try and do this too quickly. As Jonathan was saying earlier, it's a part of the life cycle of a business, and it's important that the founders and shareholders and family members see the succession coming and plan for it.
Yeah.
And they can do it in an organized fashion. I think that's the key.
Ryan, with you being part of the new generation emerging at Vakos Brothers, I mean, what kind of succession planning does the company have in place? Just how planned was your emergence as CEO?
Well, I'm sure they all had hopes that I'd become CEO and do a fairly good job at it. So, me becoming eventually the CEO, hopefully it was a good thing. You can ask my uncles if I'm doing a good job or not. So, yeah, I was the succession plan. This is my 5th year of being CEO.
What did that succession plan evolve? I mean, how were you groomed to actually take over?
Well, I started in Vakos Brothers when I was 20 because, remember, my father was on the property side. So I've spent the past, since I started working, between the property and the furniture side. 2 years here, 4 years here, 3 years here, 2 years there. And then we had 2 CEOs before me at Vakos Brothers, and it was very hard for them to fit the culture, work with my uncles in a very strong family business. It was very, very tough. And then eventually my uncle said, "Look, Ron, step in. We need you. Give it your best shot. Be behind you all the way." So I owe them everything. They trusted in me, and when I stepped in, tried my hardest, and here we are 5 years later.
Is that characteristically what we're looking at when it comes to succession planning in businesses? I mean, how formal a plan do you have to be in place? What are the key ingredients that need to be jotted down?
I think what Ryan describes is quite a common path for succession, this sort of apprenticeship model. So you start fairly young in the business, you often start in a fairly junior position, you get to know the business, and over time you begin to grow into part of the leadership of the business. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that model. I think it's a great model for succession planning. But I think we're seeing other models emerge as well. And I'm interested particularly in succession planning around the wine industry and family-owned wine farms, where traditionally a farmer's son would have maybe followed in his footsteps. Now we're starting to see, for instance, the children go off and get an MBA, learn about the business, and then return with a different set of skills. So I think that both models are valuable, but I do think we're seeing them emerge in different ways.
Can I just add on to that one? When I started in Vakos Brothers, I went straight to the warehouse, and I was dispatching goods. I worked on the trucks. I was carrying furniture into the...
So you learn the business
carrying
from the
furniture
Earning your
into...
stripes.
Earning the stripes, starting from the bottom, so I could get familiar with everything. Then eventually, at our one showroom in Dunkeld, there's a basement, which we called the bargain basement, and I was the bargain basement manager. So I had to make sure things were ticketed and everything worked like that, and I was a young little latte running around trying my hardest. And then also, my Uncle Norman's got a son. His name's Dean, he's my cousin, he's studying to be a CA, and he also, when he started, when he's on holiday, comes in straight into the warehouse on the trucks, delivering furniture, just so that you can get a feel about it, and just so that you can just see all the
And that a
types
healthy
of aspects.
balance as well. I mean, you highlighted one of the cousins within the business and looking at, getting a qualification and learning the nitty-gritty of doing business under the Vakos Brothers roof.
I think, sorry, Alicia, just to add on to what Ryan was saying now, what's good about the process and the reason the succession has worked in Vakos Brothers is because the business can see that Ryan has grown up through the business and has earned his stripes. So you're not shipping a family member in at the top to take over the reins who doesn't know the business.
Look, staff and their opinion is everything. And if you want to
But
look
that
after your
perception
staff,
is out there.
if your staff are happy, your customers are happy.
Okay, well, Jonathan, let's shift focus a little bit to the listed environment, because certainly a retailer that's come under severe criticism for the structure that it has in place is Pick n Pay. Many of its shareholders saying that the structure is inhibitive of unlocking value. The other shareholders don't get the value that they should out of the business. So it shows that there is a very fine line that we're looking at here, and a tightrope that needs to be walked.
I think Pick n Pay is a great example, and recently they have come under a lot of criticism. I think that criticism probably comes from people looking to unlock value from the company. So whereas I think that the business remains a family-owned business, and I think the Ackermans have done an amazing job at planning their own succession, their role in the business. While we know that one of the Ackermans is not the CEO of the business now, I think that they've made that choice consciously. But I think that they've retained family control, and it's given them a few things. It's given them the ability to take risks, because being the largest shareholder, they're able to take some risk. I think it's remained entrepreneurial, and I think that that's a huge advantage to the business. So I think that that's allowed it to remain a successful South African enterprise and still fulfill the mandate of a family business with a very strong culture that I think is still within the business and ultimately came from
Well, it's strong debate that's raging in South Africa, because you've got those that have that view, you've got the others that say, it's the family structure that's impeded their growth and their growth strategy, specifically on the continent as a whole. Craig, how do you know when it's time to let go completely? At what time do you say it's time to bring in an outsider, or to start considering it anyway?
I think it goes back to what I mentioned earlier, Alicia, around key performance indicators. You need some parameters, you need some benchmarks in place that are clearly measurable. And when the results that the business is delivering are not delivering against those key performance indicators, which are agreed upon by a set of executive directors, non-executive directors, a family council, whatever your governance structure is, that's an indicator that perhaps the business is not performing the way it might be, and that an independent outside advisory capacity is required. So that's what I would suggest in terms of the benchmarks and parameters.
Yeah. Is that something that you agree with, Jonathan? Because a couple of years ago I came across a stat that only 32% of family-owned businesses expect to remain in family hands.
I'm not sure I fully agree with Craig. I think that the objective for a family business is often different from the objective for a business that's held predominantly in public hands. And I think the imposition of structure and things like KPIs on a family business is difficult. Because really, while I think Pick n Pay is clearly not in that space, family businesses are often lifestyle businesses. They provide a particular lifestyle to a family, however large that might be. I think in the listed environment, we do begin to nudge up against what Craig has to say. How do you manage this business professionally, especially if you have institutional investors, while at the same time fulfilling the mandate of the family? So I think it's an incredibly difficult balance to find. I'm not sure that Pick n Pay was designed with a view to it ending at some period, so I'm sure that succession is an important issue for them, but I think we've seen that begin to happen. But what we're seeing here is the difference between succession planning around shareholding and succession planning around management. I think Pick n Pay has clearly moved into the professional management space, but there are issues around its shareholding.
Ryan, is this something that Bacchus Brothers has ever considered? And I know that you're new to the helm at this stage, and I guess verbalizing it here today would make you more of a target moving forward. But is this a consideration that you've ever made, whether it be selling off to a private company, a public company, or private equity player? I mean, has it been a consideration?
I'm not going to say no for the long term, but for the short term, I think we'll carry on as the way we are.
What would make the family change its mind?
Depends how much money's on the table.
It's all about the price tag.
We'll see. We do have ambitions to expand. We've got all strong systems in there. It is now, I brought in all the technology and all that, so we can track the business and manage it better. So we are very interested in expanding. We don't have stores in Cape Town or Durban.
Is this expansion something that you do completely by yourselves, or are there business partners that you've brought on board along the way?
No, we would do that ourselves, and we would promote staff within to manage, look after stores, go and run stores. We have decorators that go around constantly making sure our showrooms are always looking to the quality that we would like. We are always promoting internally.
Price tag aside, when we were chatting off air, you highlighted that it may well be a consideration to let go of the business if there was no effective succession plan in place.
Well, like the gentleman was saying, so 32%, or like you said, 32% of businesses don't believe that there is going to be that's because they might not have someone there to take it over within the family. So if they do have someone that they've been grooming and they have faith in, then I'm sure they would say, yeah, there is a strong possibility that the company is going to carry on and be a success.
Of course, if you are looking at exiting the business, something you've got to take into consideration is the kind of corporate culture that is going to be, is going to evolve as a result of that. How do you manage that? Because to an extent, the business was a success because of the family's way of doing business. How do you make sure that that corporate culture translates?
It's very tricky, Alicia, and I think what I've seen certainly in practice is where the ownership is transitioned into corporate hands, it loses the culture that Ryan was describing earlier. And it's very difficult to retain that when the ownership and the executive management has moved into corporate hands. Ultimately, the CEO of any business dictates the tone and culture of that business. So it is very difficult. What you'll often find in this kind of transition into corporate hands is that they lock the CEOs or the family members in for a certain period to try and retain that connection to the staff, that culture and that ethic within the business. But ultimately, it's not sustainable in the long term. The business may indeed be a success, but it won't be the family business that it was.